us. And Gopi is here.
Hi, Chetan.
Yeah, hi, Gopi. Yeah, thanks. I can hear you. So just ping you, just a second. Yeah. All right. So we're here for the last session, and Gopi is going to talk about his experiences in the workplace and DEI practices. Let me introduce Gopi to all of you. Um, Hailing from God's own country, Kerala state in India, Gopi Mohan Venugopal is a manager, corporate services, business management, and global co-chair for the Accessibility Network at LSEG. With over 12 years of diverse industry experience in various domains such as art and photography, hospitality, content production, learning and development, and service escalations, Gopi is skilled at managing global projects while building relationships across various groups and teams. In addition to his business experience, Gopi is passionate about driving projects and initiatives which would have direct impact to the business and well-being of employees as well as to mentor and lead by example. Gopi specializes in stakeholder management while also working towards creating awareness around diversity and inclusion in the workplace. Having studied and lived in the UK and widely traveled in India and abroad, Gopi likes to travel and backpack, write, and spend time with his pets in his free time. Thank you so much for taking your time off and agreeing to speak here. We're glad to have you. Over to you, Gopi.
Hi, Chetan. Thank you so much. I hope I'm audible to everybody.
I think you're not very loud. At least, yeah, not very loud.
Is it better?
Yeah, this is better.
Okay. Yeah. So good evening. I'm glad I'm the last person going because I've been running around the entire day. So I hope I can close things on a good note. So though I'm here to talk about best practices at work, I think it's important that you know my journey as well in terms of where I started and where I am right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to probably take you all through a little bit, walk you through my journey, my life, and then close it off with how things are at the work and everything. So I'll touch upon a little bit around my childhood, how things were for me in terms of how I was diagnosed, how I was a different kid, and a little bit around my education and my teenage life, and then eventually coming on to work and some of the things that we do at office, and some of the things that actually worked for me on how to tackle things differently in general. So coming to my childhood, I was always a very different kid. I think I was not really fitting into the normal box of a regular child. So I was a rebel. I was bad at studies. I just didn't really do anything. And I remember my dad and mom used to be at the principal's office pretty much every single day, and it was embarrassing to say the least. So I think it was then that I kind of figured out that I've always had this trouble with numbers, anything with numbers or alphabets. It was difficult for me. It was difficult for me to keep them in my mind. It was difficult for me to remember them. It was difficult for me to read and occasionally write as well. And there were times when I write in the 4-line book that you used to have back in school, I used to write like a doctor, almost like painting or drawing like a mountain and things like that. So it was very difficult for anybody else to understand what I wrote, but I perfectly understood it. So it was me trying to sort of juggle in a world of my own, while also being amongst people who didn't really understand me. And I don't think it's their fault, right? Because back in the day, and this was in 2000, I don't know, 1999 ish, between 1990s to about 2006. I think most people didn't even have those conversations around invisible disabilities or people being different and things like that. So it's perfectly fine because that's how things were back then. Even my parents, I remember when I went to college, I mean, when I went to school, I failed my eighth standard, and my teachers were like, let's put him into humanities, let's put him into arts, let's put him into something else. He might be a bad student, but and it was we didn't the term learning disability was not really a thing back then, and I kind of again I felt like a stranger in my own life. But there were hacks which I sort of devised for myself, which worked for me. For example, and I some of them I still do it. So I had trouble remembering numbers or anything. Anyone told me anything about numbers, it was very difficult for me to comprehend. One of the most important things was time. So time was a very, very difficult thing and a complex thing for me in my head. So if you are traveling to a native place and it took like 4 hours, someone told me 4 hours, I started getting anxious inside. And again, I do suffer from anxiety, but this is something which I didn't know as a kid. So I was suffering. I mean, I used to freak out and, kind of think that, okay, 4 hours, it's a long time. What am I going to do? What am I going to do in between? There's in between 4 hours, an hour has 60 minutes. 60 minutes has so many seconds. So it's very difficult for me. So what I used to do was, I absolutely love music, right? So every song, generally, on an average, a song used to be 3 to 5 minutes, right? So I used to have this old Walkman back in the days when we didn't have Spotify and things like that. So I used to have a Walkman with me all the time, and I used to play music. So for me, 3 songs used to be 15 minutes approximately. 6 songs approximately was half an hour. 12 to 13 songs was an hour. And that's how I used to calculate time, and that's how I used to sort of keep myself in check. So if you're going somewhere and it took 1 hour, okay, I'll grab my headset on, probably listen to about 12 to 13 songs, and by then we'll be there. I also use music to keep my mood in check. So it all depends for me. If I'm in a very happy mood, I play music. If I'm in a very sort of a mood where I need some uplifting, I used to play like very soft music. And sometimes where I just wanted to jam my thoughts, where I kind of feel like, there's too much going on, I used to play music which I don't even like, but it used to be loud to a point where it used to jam my thoughts, which helped for me. I'm not saying that's the right thing to do. It's a hack for anyone. I mean, people devise their own hacks, and you stick onto something which you find useful for yourself. And I also used to sketch, and this is something I used to love doing as well. Sketching and then sort of arranging my thoughts. Whatever I used to feel, I used to put it in a piece of paper. And mostly it used to be pencil sketching. So if I felt sad, it used to be quite dark. If I felt happy, it used to be all not colorful, but the pictures used to be better. So that was also something that helped me. Now, coming on to my school, I mean, that was my school and things like that. But coming on to my college, it was a very new experience for me because I didn't want to do anything core numbers or core, development sort of stuff, or engineering or doctor or anything like that, because I felt like arts was my thing. So I went and joined a college in Coimbatore to do my undergrad in film and communication. And that's really where I kind of started figuring out who I was, and maybe not what I wanted to do, but I really started figuring out who I was. It kind of changed my life entirely, because that's when I figured out what photography was, and I got a camera. So anything and anytime, along with music, I had photography, where if I felt something, I used to take a picture that resonated with that feeling. if I wanted to communicate something which I couldn't tell someone, I used to take a picture and just show it to them. And sometimes they understood, sometimes they didn't. But the most important part was how it made me feel. So that was something different for me. And then I decided to major in photography, and I moved to England. I did my master's in documentary photojournalism, and so now I already had music and photography in my hand. And then I wanted a new challenge, and I added traveling into my bucket list. And I mean, I think through that 2 3 years, I just ended up being a dangerously extroverted person. And you put me in a room with 100 people, I'll blend in about 5 minutes, and I absolutely love that. I mean, just go to people, random strangers, talk to them, take pictures of them. And I used to work for a newspaper in England. It used to be a lot of fun. I mean, you used to communicate things, communicate difficult messages, communicate things which you may not agree with, but sort of battling your own demons in your head. And I think that's when through time, I started adding in hacks which really could help me get by my day. So music, photography, traveling, all of these were things which I liked. And I ended up traveling halfway around the world. I worked for Walt Disney. I worked on their ships. I backpacked a lot. I met some absolutely phenomenal people who taught me more about what life is. And that's where I got diagnosed with dyslexia. And suddenly, everything, my entire childhood just made sense, because for a long time, I thought that I was just this very odd child who couldn't figure things out on my own. So everything sort of made sense when I was diagnosed with dyslexia in university. Now the good part was, unlike in India, in England, and this was in 2006 or 2009, all these were already common, right? Because being different or having a disability, invisible disabilities, were very common in England. And that was very commonly spoken about. It was very openly spoken about. Gender diversity, being a gay person, being a lesbian person, being a transgender, all of this was very openly spoken about. And I think those were the 4 years where I actually and truly and mostly lived my life as me. And that's where I learned the most that I could. And along with all this, it was a learning experience for me. I was learning things about myself. Then I moved back to India, and that's when I had my first taste with depression. And it was a very dark time, because a few things happened in my life, and my anxiety sort of kicked in. And again, I didn't know I had anxiety back then. Even then, anxiety was there, the dyslexia was there, work was there, and I was just trying to figure out myself. And I mean, it was a very bad time. And I mean, I openly tell people that I've even tried committing suicide 6 times, and it was a failed attempt 6 different times. And for whatever reason, I'm still here. I'm thankful to all those reasons, and probably my parents' prayer, my friends who prayed for me, who stood by me, that I'm here. I'm able to make change and drive cultural changes as well, right? So ever since, I've been able to help people. Anytime when someone goes through a problem, I try to sort of sit with them and not give them solutions, but just to make sure that they know that they're not alone. Because sometimes what happens is, and this is something which I tell my parents as well, sometimes all people like me, I mean, when I say people like me, someone who has an invisible disability, someone who suffers from dyslexia, depression, all we need is just to be heard. We don't need someone giving us solutions. We just want someone to just sit there and hear us. Because I'm someone who believes that acknowledgement is more important than acceptance, right? That's very important to me. You don't have to agree with me, but just acknowledge that this is what I'm going through, and that's fine. I'm at least that way. I know that I'm being acknowledged, right? So all this brought together through work. I've been doing a lot of stuff around work, which I'll just talk about. But But 2 months back, I got diagnosed with ADHD as well. And my first thought was like, you know what, dyslexia, anxiety, ADHD. I'm like, it doesn't make any difference. It's nothing changes really. But the reason I got that diagnosis was, and the reason I'm telling that is because if you feel remotely that you have or you are being troubled with something, please make sure you get that tested. Please make sure. I know sometimes it's better not to know, but then it's always good to know, because that way you're provided with the right. I mean, you're equipped with the right things to help you deal with those situations, right? So I was fidgeting around with things. I used to have every time, even now when I talk, it's I need something in my hand. So even now when I talk, I have my earphone in my palm. So every 3 seconds, I keep clenching my earphone, or it could be a pen's cap. I couldn't sit still. I was just walking around during meetings. I sit down for 2 minutes. I stand up again, sit down. I started forgetting things which I did 10 minutes ago. And that's when I decided, okay, let me just get it tested. I got it tested, and it is what it is. I mean, and I one thing which I very proactively did was started taking therapy. And I'm someone who feels that everyone in the world should actively seek out help and take therapy. You might be perfectly fine, but it's always good to sort of unload those small things, right? It's good for you. It's good for your mental health. Now, coming back to work, so all my experiences put together, I wanted to sort of come into work and help people in terms of driving certain changes and driving cultural changes specifically. I wanted people to start talking about not just disability, invisible disabilities in particular, because when we talk about disabilities, what happens is everyone resonates to someone using a wheelchair or someone using a stick. That's what a disability is for them. So I wanted to sort of bring about those changes where, you know, people start talking about invisible disability. This happened when I was at work one day and I had an anxiety attack, and they thought that I didn't have food in the morning. And it's not I'm not putting them at fault. It's just that they don't know about it, right? And that's when I realized we need to talk about these things more often. And we had an accessibility network. We were doing a lot at that time itself, right? But over the years, I'm so happy that we were able to sort of address a lot of things, and we were able to sort of strike those chords in people's mind and sort of make them think, okay, this is the right thing to do, this is the right thing to say. And what we've been predominantly doing is to raise awareness around all kinds of disabilities, but especially invisible disabilities. A couple of things which we were doing is, one is reverse mentoring. So mentoring in general is when a senior person mentors a junior person. But what we did was we flipped that around. We collaborated with the Pride community in our office, the Women's Network at our office, along with accessibility. All three of us came together, and we got some of our senior leaders paired up with people from within these three groups. It could be a women employee, it could be someone within the community, it could be someone who has a disability, or at times could be an ally as well. So we pair them up with senior leaders to sort of walk them through the challenges that they are facing, hear directly from them, so that they're able to make changes. And when I say make changes, it doesn't have to be big changes. It can be something as small as, okay, I'll hire one disabled person in my team next year, or I'll conduct so many awareness sessions in my group next year. I'll hire 2 women employees in my company, in my group next year. It could be very, very simple changes. And the results are phenomenal. I mean, some of the leaders, they took away a lot of learning, so many things that previously they could have ignored, or they might have not known. So a lot of conversations happened around things like that. We have inclusive, accessible washrooms. I mean, we have gender neutral washrooms. That's something which came out of all our DNI conversations and meetings. Our events are inclusive, and we have interpreters and subtitles for most of our events where possible. All our events have subtitles. Interpreters, we are still trying to make interpreters available for all our events. We have inclusive workshops. So we have, I know one of my friends is there on the call, Kavya. So she's from Enable India. So we partner with Enable India quite a lot, to have a lot of awareness sessions in office, out of which a couple of them recently, which we had was, we brought in some of the two events. I'll highlight those two events because it was very emotional, very personal for me. So we brought in a lot of, I think about 40 blind candidates from Enable India. We took them to HAL Museum, and we had about another 40 or 60 candidates from London Stock Exchange who were graduates, management graduates. We paired them up with the blind candidates from Enable India. The task was to just walk them around the campus, show them the planes, make them touch the planes, and explain what they are seeing. Right. Some of the candidates, I mean, some of our employees after the session was teary-eyed. I mean, it really touched a chord, and it was really emotional for them. It was so emotional for me to just see that, just witness that. And we actually had another event 2 days back where it was called an inclusive screening, a movie screening, where we played the movie Barfi. And there were a few people. I mean, we again had candidates from Enable India who were blind. And then we had our employees. While the movie was playing, our employee was explaining what was happening on the screen. And again, I mean, I don't know about the others. I cried. I was there just for the last 30 minutes, and I was just emotional for me, way too emotional. You should have just seen when someone explains. There was this one candidate who was just laughing and just smiling away just by hearing what they were hearing, right? And that's the kind of difference that we want to make in the corporate industry, right? We want to sensitize our workforce to think about a better and more inclusive future. Now, if you ask me, will this happen tomorrow? Will this happen? Can we achieve this through our generation? Maybe not. Can we achieve this through the next generation? Probably not. Probably the generation that follows after that might get things right. And I'm happy because I'd like to think that, okay, I carved the path for that to happen. Right? It might have taken 50, 60 years, but I laid the stepping stone for that to happen, right? And that's very, very important. Digital accessibility, that's something which we really take seriously. We have a lot of an array of softwares which people with disabilities and invisible disabilities can use. I'm also trying to sort of bring up, art has really helped me personally. So I'm trying to sort of bring in art and communication together and help our employees, especially our leaders, to sort of give them an overview of how you can communicate better through art. So I've already started talking with an organization who can come in and bring in their autistic children to teach our leaders how to communicate better with art, right? Now, it's all about thinking differently. It's all about doing things differently. But in the end, it's just about not just wanting to fit in, right? Because I mean, after all, I don't think any of us are different. Someone who has a disability versus someone who doesn't, I don't think we are any different. If you ask me personally, most of the people in the world, and if you start testing for disabilities, almost all of us will have some disability or the other, right? So it's all about seeing the world a little differently, seeing the world with a lot of compassion, just being empathetic to people. Now, a couple of things, and I'll wind things off. What's helped me personally in my journey through when I was in school till now, one is journaling. I always write. I used to write letters to my grandma who passed years ago. So every time I was sad, every time I was anxious, I used to write a letter to her. And I used to just keep it somewhere. But the fact that I was just writing it felt like it made me feel like I was talking to her. I used to write letters to myself. Sometimes I still do that. I mean, I still write letters to myself saying that, you know what, it's okay. It's fine. You're frustrated. It's fine. You're not happy with something. It's okay. It's in the end, we are just human. It's perfectly fine just to be yourself. I started learning things which are things which I thought I could never do previously. Out of which one was I've gone and booked myself a motorcycle. Funny thing is, I don't even know how to ride a motorcycle. So the motorcycle will come in 4 months. So I have 4 months to learn how to drive a motorcycle. So that's the target I'm setting for myself. I have 6 cats. I had 10, 3 of them passed. So I have 6 cats now. I volunteer with Charlie's Animal Rescue Center on weekends. Gives me a lot of joy. Keeps my mental health in check. I do a lot of gardening. Just got myself 3 kilos worth of tomatoes. So if anyone wants tomatoes, please get in touch. And I take therapy very actively, and that's something which I would encourage everyone to do. And most importantly, something which is very close to my heart is I travel. I still do that occasionally, or at least once a month. I just go to the trains app or the planes, whatever plane app is there. I just get the first flight or the first train out to wherever that goes, within India, obviously. And then, I mean, I just travel, make friends, meet new people, take pictures and everything. Now, I just want to close out with a very, very thoughtful quote. Someone recently asked me, how do you want yourself to be remembered, right? And it was a very tough question for me to answer. Now, I don't know if you all heard about Maya Angelou. She's an American poet, a very, very good one. There was a quote. There was a quote from her. I'm not going to explain it because everything that I want to say about that question is in that 2 lines. So the quote goes like this: I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And I hope everyone can use this to sort of build on and just spread the love. I think that's the best way to put it. So thank you very much for giving me the time to talk, and thanks a lot, everyone. Thanks, Chetan.
Thanks so much, Gopi, for that beautiful, quote, and ending that with such a thoughtful one. Thanks so much, and also for highlighting so many aspects of your personal journey and your professional journey, and the way you've made, the workspace more accessible and inclusive. Starting from your own personal journey of how time perception can be seen differently, right, understood differently, and the hacks that you mentioned. And I think an important aspect of being heard that you mentioned resonates a lot with all of us. So thanks so much. And specifically about the changes that you've been actively involved in workplace, bringing the cultural change and looking at disabilities beyond the physical disabilities, and including invisible disabilities, right? And some of the initiatives such as reverse mentoring that you mentioned, collaboration with other groups. I think they're really fascinating. I think these are some of the things that we can think of and really use that in our occupational and work spaces as well. So thanks so much for taking your time off.